The shadow is not just a psychological concept. It is a force hidden in the deepest depths of our soul that controls us on a subconscious level. What we reject, hide, or forget is the shadow. However, there is one shadow that is silenced. A shadow that has been hidden behind the facades of society for so long that its presence seems almost imperceptible. It is the shadow of women. From childhood we are taught certain rules of behavior, especially for women. A woman must be gentle, caring, reserved, and tolerant. She cannot be aggressive, determined, or emotionally out of control. But what happens when these limitations begin to constrict her soul? What happens when a woman cannot express her power, her passion, her desires? A woman's shadow is hidden desires, repressed ambitions, repressed passions. All the things she can't express because of social standards, all the things she is afraid to show or are forbidden to show. The shadow is not an enemy. It's a hidden power. And the path to freedom begins the moment a woman realizes her shadow, meets it, and stops being afraid of it. When a woman realizes that the shadow is not an enemy but a powerful hidden force, her life begins to change. She no longer submits to what is imposed on her from the outside, she begins to realize her true nature. And this process is not destruction but transformation. The path to liberation begins with accepting what is hidden in you, not rejecting it. And here is the paradox. The more we reject our shadow, the more it controls us. By accepting it, we become masters of our own destiny, not slaves to other people's expectations. And it is this acceptance that will be the first step towards true freedom. The shadow of a woman has always been a product of social expectations and standards. For millennia, there were strict boundaries that women had to squeeze themselves into. It wasn't just about appearance, behavior, or even personal choices. It was about her essence. A woman had to be good, had to be obedient, had to be caring, had to stay within the bounds of what is commonly considered femininity. But what if a woman's nature is much deeper than these limits? What if there is not only softness and tenderness in a woman, but also aggression, passion, determination, and even toughness? That's when the shadow comes into the light. A woman begins to feel an inner struggle when her true self is confronted with the demands of society. She cannot fully express herself because she fears being judged. These social demands not only limit but also suppress her nature. Over time, the woman begins to lose contact with herself. She no longer knows what her true wants and needs are, because all she knows is what is expected of her. And that's where the shadow comes in. The shadow is those feelings and desires that have been pushed out of consciousness, that the woman finds unacceptable or even scary. But what happens when the shadow comes to the surface? It is not destruction but liberation. Liberation from illusions, from other people's expectations, from social shackles. A woman who realizes her shadow begins to rebuild her life. She is no longer afraid to be herself, she accepts all parts of herself, even the parts that were once considered bad. And this is the hidden power of the shadow. The more a woman allows herself to be herself, regardless of what society expects of her, the more powerful and authentic she becomes. This liberation is not about being accepted by the outside world, but about becoming accepted by herself. Translated with deephell.com free version. A woman living in the shadows often does not understand her archetypes. Her inner map is muddied by external influences. The archetypes that should guide her are closed. She is like a blind man moving without knowing the direction, subconsciously searching for her true strength, but instead falling into the traps of other people's beliefs. Every woman has these archetypes in her: mother, maiden, witch, goddess. These figures carry deep-coded powers that can transform a woman, but only if she allows herself to see them. The shadows of these archetypes, however, are often distorted. They turn into misconceptions. The mother is a woman who cannot exist outside the family, the witch is a stereotype of evil and manipulation. The virgin is an unrealistic figure of infallible purity. This distortion of archetypes leads to their demise. But what if a woman begins to recognize their true essence? What if she stops being afraid of the depths of her archetypes and admits that each of them has its own dark side, its own shadow that needs to be integrated? A mother not only loves unconditionally, but can also be cruel when her boundaries are violated. The witch is not evil, she has the power of transformation that can break old structures. A virgin is not just innocence, it is integrity, the ability to be purposeful, to have a goal. As soon as a woman begins to recognize these archetypes in herself, she stops being afraid of the shadow. She realizes that without this dark side, her archetypes will never be complete, and therefore cannot be powerful. That is why it is important not to reject the shadow, not to fight it, but to recognize it as a part of your inner world. Only through the integration of archetypes in their entirety can a woman become a true and stronger version of herself. Translated with deepl.com free version. Every woman who enters the world of her shadow faces a huge question of power. Power is not just external control, it is the ability to be the master of your emotions, your life, your choices. But many women are afraid of power because it is often associated with aggression, cruelty, and manipulation. They are worried that by exercising power, they will become someone they do not want to be. The power we lose often seems unattainable to us. We allow other people or circumstances to dictate how we should feel or act. And this is the illusion of weakness. But when a woman begins to recognize her shadow, she discovers tremendous power within herself. The power she seeks is not something that is given to her from the outside, but something that she takes into her own hands, starting with the acceptance of her own inner strength. A woman who accepts her shadow is no longer afraid of power, because she realizes that it is not control over others, but control over herself. She does not manipulate, does not use others to get her way. It simply carries its truth and its power, not allowing any circumstances or people to define its essence. And here is the key: the power we seek has always been within us. It is not about having control over the outside world, but about maintaining balance and integrity within ourselves. Power becomes not aggression, but inner harmony that reflects our true strength. You need to go through pain to reach a new level of awareness. Pain is an important part of the journey. But pain often causes us fear. We try to avoid it because it seems to us to be something undesirable. It is associated with loss, with absence, with something that we cannot get back. But in reality, pain is what opens us up to transformation. Every woman's shadow often consists of lost parts of herself. These are traumas, unlived emotions, resentments, forgotten dreams. All this remains in the depths of consciousness, like lost fragments that require attention. And when a woman abandons these parts, she cannot become whole. She will constantly look for herself in the outside world, trying to find what she is missing. Loss can be painful, but it is only through pain that one can reach a new level. A woman who has experienced pain does not remain the same as she was before. She is transformed. And this transformation is not about restoring what has been lost, but about building a new part of herself that is much stronger, wiser, and deeper. Therefore, it is important to allow yourself to feel this pain, not to be afraid of it, but to experience it. It will lead to the discovery of new aspects of yourself. Only through pain and loss can we become who we really are. Accepting your shadow is not just a psychological process. It is a real art that requires deep courage from a woman. The shadow is all those parts of her personality that she rejects, does not want to see, or is even ashamed of. The shadow can contain her deepest fears, desires that do not meet social or cultural requirements. But without these dark parts, a woman cannot become whole. She tries to be only a part of herself, a fragment, but this will constantly cause a feeling of instability and incompleteness. The shadow, however, has tremendous power. When a woman allows herself to accept her shadow, she becomes whole. She stops fighting with herself and starts using her true power. Accepting the shadow is not necessarily about changing your character or actions. It's about recognizing that every aspect of the personality has the right to exist. The shadow we face is not an enemy, it is a part of us. It shows us where we have not yet recognized ourselves, where we have left room for fear, where we have not yet allowed ourselves to be free. This acceptance becomes a powerful moment of transformation. Once we allow ourselves to be whole, our strength is restored. We no longer become victims of our own fears and begin to use our shadow as a source of energy for growth and development. The shadow is not only the dark side, it is also an inexhaustible source of creative energy. When a woman allows herself to be with the shadow, when she refuses to fight it, she opens up access to enormous power. All creativity that can change reality comes from a place of deep, intuitive experience. The shadow holds everything that we could not express openly: unexpressed pain, unsaid words, undisclosed desires. These emotions and thoughts can be the most powerful impulses for creativity. Artists, writers, musicians, they all get inspiration from the part of themselves that is hidden in the depths of the shadow. And a woman who allows herself to look into this dark part can not only transform herself, but also create something incredible that will change her life and the lives of others. The shadow in her work can be not only a way to express her emotions, but also to a deeper understanding of herself. It opens up new horizons for development, makes it possible to see the world from a different perspective, to see what was previously hidden. The idea of the shadow as a source of creativity gives a woman the key to endless possibilities. When she stops being afraid of her darker parts, she opens up access to limitless potential that can turn her whole life around. When a woman doesn't recognize her shadow, her relationships with other people often become an endless cycle of manipulation and dissatisfaction. The shadow creates walls between her and others. She cannot openly share her emotions because she is afraid of being rejected. She keeps inside what she does not want to see, and this creates distortions in her relationships. However, it is important to understand that relationships are a reflection of our shadow. When we do not allow ourselves to open up completely, we create limitations for other people. We cannot truly love when we do not love ourselves in our entirety. We cannot build deep connections when a part of us is left in the dark. The shadow that is present in a woman is the barrier that prevents her from opening up to another person. This is what she does not allow to be shown even to her closest ones. The shadow does not allow her to be free in her feelings and emotions. However, as soon as a woman accepts her shadow, she becomes more open. Relationships become not a place of manipulation, but a space for deep truth and acceptance. Once we recognize our dark side, we are no longer afraid to give ourselves to another person. Illusions are what hide the truth. Every woman has her own ideas about what she should be, how she should look, how her relationships and life in general should go. These illusions are restrictions that rob her of her freedom. She tries to squeeze herself into a narrow framework, creating images that are imposed on her from the outside. But these illusions limit her potential. They do not allow her to see her true self. Every woman who strives for true freedom must go through this process of recognizing and abandoning her illusions. Only then can she feel free. Giving up illusions is a step towards inner truth. One no longer seeks validation from the outside because he knows who he really is. Freedom does not consist in the absence of external constraints. It begins with the realization and abandonment of illusions, from the moment we stop trying to be someone else and simply allow ourselves to be ourselves. When a woman goes through this path of accepting the shadow, she reaches a new level of consciousness. She stops fighting with herself, is no longer afraid of her darker sides, and can begin to create her reality again. The shadow is no longer something to be afraid of, but its strongest part. From now on, it is no longer just a reflection of social demands or other people's expectations. It becomes itself again, whole, strong, real. And here, in this moment, the woman realizes that the path to freedom is not about running away from the shadow. It lies in accepting it, understanding it, and using it to become real.